When Wyatt Kane stepped onto that ranch in his best shirt and a borrowed hat, he thought he was just there to deliver water barrels. He didn't expect to see her nearly 7 feet tall, broad as an ox, and dressed in a lace wedding gown that shimmered in the golden light. She smiled like she'd been waiting years for him. "Come help me undress," she said. That was the last time anyone saw Wyatt in town. "Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from and if strange love stories and unexpected turns are your kind of thing. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories just like this one coming your way, and tomorrow's might just be wilder than what you're about to hear." The sky was the kind of blue you only got out past county lines, where the land stretched too wide to carry secrets. Wyatt Kane nudged his horse forward, the wagon creaking behind him under the weight of 3 rusted water barrels. Dust kicked up under hoof, catching the light like ash in a dying fire. The ranch was supposed to be abandoned. That's what the old man at the post office said when Wyatt asked for directions. "Ain't nobody up there but bones and bad memories," he muttered, sliding a yellowed map across the counter. But that was 3 days ago, and now Wyatt was here, hat tipped low, throat dry, and something uneasy curling under his ribs. He spotted the house before he saw her. 2 stories, crooked roofline, weather-worn paint barely clinging to the wood. A windmill creaked nearby, unmoving despite the breeze. The front porch sagged under the weight of years, but it wasn't empty. A woman stood there, alone, like a statue carved from sun and muscle. Wyatt's reins slackened in his hands as he took her in. She was tall, taller than tall, maybe 6 to 9 or 7 feet, barefoot in the dust and wearing a white lace wedding gown that hugged every ripple of her body like it had been stitched directly to her skin. The dress glowed in the late afternoon light, and the long veil danced lazily in the breeze like it had a life of its own. Wyatt dismounted slowly, boots crunching on gravel. I was told this place needed water," he managed, removing his hat out of respect or maybe fear. The woman smiled, not soft or shy, but with the full weight of someone who had waited. "You're late," she said. Her voice was low, steady, with just enough drawl to catch him off guard. 3 days late, to be exact. He tried to find a polite smile, but his mouth felt like it was filled with cotton. "Wasn't aware I was expected. Name's Wyatt Kane. Just here to marry me," she finished. Her eyes, pale and sharp like polished bones, studied him without blinking. "And to stay. But first," she added, taking one deliberate step forward, "come help me undress." The words hit harder than they should have. Not because they were crude, they weren't. She spoke them the way someone might say, "Pass the salt," or "Close the door behind you." Like a ritual. Like it had already been agreed upon. Wyatt froze. The sun hung low behind her, turning her into a silhouette of impossible strength and soft lace. She didn't move again, just stood there watching him, waiting. Behind him, the horse shifted restlessly. The wind died completely. Wyatt cleared his throat and forced himself to step forward, one boot after the other, until he reached the bottom of the porch stairs. "I think there's been some mistake," he said quietly. But part of him already knew there hadn't, and the part that didn't believe yet was running out of time. The wooden steps groaned beneath Wyatt's boots as he climbed the porch. Up close, the woman was even more imposing, not just in size, but in presence. Her skin glowed bronze under the setting sun, the kind of skin that spoke of years in open air and hard labor. The lace veil fluttered around her shoulders, and when she turned to open the door, Wyatt caught a glimpse of thick, corded muscle along her back, sculpted like a statue. Not softened by vanity, but hardened by purpose. Inside, the house was unexpectedly warm, not just from the fire crackling in the hearth, but from the strange sense that someone had kept this place alive. The air smelled of rose oil and worn wood. Dried herbs hung above the windows, and a plate of biscuits sat on the table as if someone had expected company. Wyatt didn't know what he thought he'd find: cobwebs, dust, decay, but it wasn't this. She didn't speak again until he followed her into a sitting room, dimly lit but tidy. She gestured to a chair like a host might in the middle of a polite dinner party. "Sit," she said, her voice gentler now. "You look like your feet hurt." Wyatt hesitated, but the leather armchair looked safe enough. He sank into it slowly, his legs more tired than he'd realized. She remained standing, backlit by the fire, one hand toying with the edge of her veil. "My name is June," she said. "I was promised a husband 3 summers ago." Wyatt blinked. "By who?" She smiled at him again, that same slow, almost sad smile. "Your uncle, Harold Kane. He owned this land, Made a deal when he knew the end was coming. I took care of him in his final months. Bathed him, fed him, nursed the pain from his bones. In return, he promised me two things: the deed to this ranch, and a man worth keeping it alive for. Wyatt stared at her, his throat dry. He never told me that. He told me you'd come, June said simply. Said his nephew was a good man. Said you needed this land more than anyone else. And that if I was patient, you'd arrive just when I needed you most. He looked around the room again, the biscuits, the flickering candles, the way every surface gleamed like it had been scrubbed that morning. So, you just waited? I stayed ready, she corrected. Because promises matter out here. Wyatt rubbed the back of his neck, uncertain how much of this was grief, madness, or something else entirely. But you were in a wedding dress. June stepped toward him slowly, the floor creaking beneath her weight. If you believed in what was promised to you, wouldn't you get dressed for it? She reached for the pins at the base of her veil, and Wyatt found himself unable to move, not from fear exactly, but from the overwhelming sense that this moment had started long before he arrived. Wyatt didn't speak as June unfastened the last pin and let the veil fall gently over the arm of the couch. Her hair, pale, almost silver blonde, spilled loose across her shoulders in thick waves. She didn't look at him as she moved to unhook the delicate buttons lining the back of her dress. It wasn't a performance. There was nothing coy or seductive in the way she moved. It was quiet, practiced, like she had done this before, and each time, it had meant something different. I'm not here to claim anything, Wyatt said finally, his voice low. I didn't know about the deal. I didn't come to marry anyone. June paused, her hands resting at the curve of her waist. But you brought the water, didn't you? She said without turning. You came when the barrels ran dry. You showed up right on time, just like Harold said. Wyatt stood, unsure what he was standing for. He could still feel the wind on his neck from outside, the weight of the sky behind him, but this house was too still, too warm, like it existed slightly out of step with the world he knew. Your uncle didn't just leave me a ranch, June continued. She turned slowly now, the gown sliding lower on her shoulders, revealing more of her sinewed arms and broad chest. He left me a burden. This land doesn't run on its own, and it doesn't let people leave once they're part of it. Wyatt frowned. What do you mean it doesn't let people leave? June crossed the room and opened a drawer in an old cedar chest. From it, she pulled out a folded document, thick paper, frayed edges, Harold Kane's signature inked in firm strokes at the bottom. She handed it to Wyatt without a word. He unfolded it slowly, his stomach tightening. It wasn't just a deed, it was a contract, half written in legal jargon, half in Harold's unmistakable scrawl. It mentioned water rights, land stewardship, marital union, and disturbingly a clause about perpetual companionship. The terms were vague but binding. A transfer of responsibility from Harold to Wyatt, from June to him. Wyatt backed up a step. He didn't have the right to sign me into anything. That's not legal. June's eyes softened for the first time. It's not about legal. It's about real. Outside, the wind had stopped again. No rustle of trees, no clatter of windmill. Wyatt realized he hadn't heard a single bird since he arrived. You don't understand this land yet, June said gently. But it already understands you. And now that you're here, you'll have to decide fast whether you'll fight it or become part of it. Wyatt's eyes flicked back to the paper in his hands. Ink doesn't bleed unless it's fresh. The signature at the bottom, it had dried today. Wyatt let the contract fall from his fingers like it had burned him. The parchment hit the hardwood floor with a soft whisper, but the sound echoed through the room like a gavel. June didn't move to pick it up. She only watched him with that patient, unblinking calm, the kind reserved for people who already knew how this ended. He stepped back toward the door, suddenly aware of how warm the air had become. His breath felt heavier in his lungs. This is insane, he muttered, reaching for the handle. It didn't turn. Not jammed, not locked. Just stuck. Like the wood had swelled or the house itself had grown tired of letting people leave. You're scared, June said from behind him. That's all right. They all were at first. He turned slowly. They? She nodded once. 3 men before you, all promised by Harold. None stayed long enough to understand what was being offered. Wyatt's heart kicked hard against his ribs. What happened to them? June's voice stayed level. One ran and was found by a dry creek bed, still clutching the contract. One stayed too long and forgot who he was. The third just vanished, like the land swallowed him. She tilted her head. But I think you're different. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Because part of him, the rational part that lived in town, that paid bills and held doors open, was already losing the argument to something older, deeper. The part of him that believed in curses whispered that she wasn't lying. And the part of him that had been lonely for far too long whispered something worse. What if this is what you've been waiting for? June stepped forward. She reached behind her back, and with a slow, sure motion, unhooked the final clasp. The gown, delicate and heavy, slid from her shoulders and landed at her feet in a quiet heap. Underneath, she wore nothing but skin and strength, a body carved by years of labor, powerful and unapologetically feminine. She didn't cover herself. She didn't flinch. Wyatt's eyes dropped instinctively, then snapped back to hers. It wasn't modesty that stopped him. It was respect, and confusion, and a rising tide of something more dangerous, curiosity. "I'm not asking you to do anything tonight," June said softly. "Only to see me, all of me, and decide if that frightens you more than being alone again." He swallowed hard, throat tight. "Why me?" June walked closer, not menacing, just sure. "Because you're the only one who didn't turn around the second you saw me. You stepped onto this porch. You listened. You're still here." The fire crackled behind her, casting long shadows along the floor. Wyatt stood rooted, eyes locked on hers. Everything in him screamed for a clean exit, but something else held him fast. Not desire. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Recognition. Wyatt lay awake in the guest bedroom, fully clothed, boots off but knife still within reach. The window rattled softly from a wind that wasn't there, and the lantern on the bedside table flickered with a rhythm that didn't match the breeze. The walls groaned every so often, like the house itself was shifting to breathe. He'd locked the door out of instinct, but some part of him knew it wouldn't matter if June wanted in. She hadn't followed him. After undressing, she had gathered the gown, folded it over her arm like it was sacred, and vanished into another room with nothing more than a parting glance. Not a look of rejection, not an invitation either. Just acknowledgement, like they'd passed the first test, and she was giving him space to choose. He turned over for the 5th time, the thin quilt suddenly too warm. The contract still haunted him, not just the ink, but the smell of it, the weight. His uncle's handwriting, so familiar and so foreign all at once. Wyatt had never known Harold well. The man was a drifter, a trouble magnet, a legend in saloons and a ghost in church records. But this felt like something intentional, like Harold had sent Wyatt here not to punish him, but to free him. Something thumped in the hallway. Wyatt froze, pulse skipping. Then again a slow, rhythmic knock, not on his door, but the wall outside it. 3 beats. A pause. Then again, not demanding, not urgent, just there. He sat up, listening. Nothing followed. No footsteps, no voice. He reached for the lantern and rose slowly, barefoot on creaky floorboards. The knock didn't repeat. When he opened the door, the hallway was empty, lit only by moonlight slanting in through the far window. At the end stood June's closed door, a soft glow leaking out from underneath. Wyatt stepped out and moved down the hall like a man floating in a dream. As he passed the second bedroom, something caught his eye, a framed photo on a shelf. He paused. The image was old and faded, but it showed a man standing beside June, arm awkwardly around her waist. He looked familiar. After a moment, Wyatt realized why. He had his own eyes, or close enough. A cousin maybe, or a brother Harold never told him about. Another one promised, another one lost. He turned from the photo and reached June's door, but he didn't knock. Instead, he sat down on the floor beside it, back to the wall, and waited. At some point in the night, the light under her door went out. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. And in the stillness, something between them settled, not love, not yet, but the quiet contract of 2 people who both knew what it meant to be chosen and left behind. The morning never truly came. Wyatt stirred to the dull gray of dawn, but the sun never crested the horizon. The sky outside his window hung in a strange half-light, like the land had forgotten how to turn over into day. Birds didn't sing. No rooster crowed. The silence was so complete, it rang in his ears. He stepped outside barefoot, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and looked out over the property. The fields were still, the trees motionless. Even the windmill stood frozen. Something in his gut twisted not with fear, exactly, but with a sense that time had paused for reasons beyond understanding. He found June already awake, sitting on the porch steps, legs tucked beneath her in a way that didn't quite match her size, as if she were trying to shrink herself down, to disappear into the quiet. She wore a linen shift now, plain and sleeveless, her shoulders broad under the morning mist. She didn't look at him. "This place," Wyatt said softly. "It's not right. It's not wrong either," she replied. "It just is." He sat beside her. The wood beneath them was cool and damp. "You said others were promised to you. What happened to them, really?" June's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn away. They couldn't stay. Not because they didn't want to. Because the house wouldn't let them. She paused. "They came with fear, not heart. And this land, it knows the difference." Wyatt looked out at the barn, the empty corrals, the open gates that led nowhere. "What is this place?" June drew in a breath that sounded like it hurt. A kind of trap, but not one made to punish. One made to preserve something. A promise. A life. Maybe even love. She finally turned to face him. "But it's old. And tired. And it doesn't forgive easy." Wyatt thought back to the contract. To the house that wouldn't let him leave. To the man in the photo with eyes like his. Was he family? She nodded once. "Your cousin, I think. Name was Aaron. He was kind. Curious. But he didn't last. He tried to dig his way out one night, thought he could tunnel past the boundaries. The ground caved in on him." Wyatt's throat tightened. "You buried him?" "No," June said. "The earth took him back." They sat in silence after that. The kind that fills up every empty space between two people who know there's nothing left to say, only choices left to make. June stood. "Come on. I want to show you something." He followed her across the yard to the storage shed near the rear fence. Inside was a room he hadn't seen the day before, its walls lined with unopened wedding gifts. Wrapped boxes. Some yellowing with age, others newer, cleaner. Tags hung from each one. To June and Aaron. To June and Samuel. To June and Elias. And near the back, to June and Wyatt. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. It was wrapped in black paper. Wyatt stared at the gift in his hands. The black paper felt too cold, even in the warm, still air. The tag was handwritten, elegant cursive that didn't match any hand he knew, to June and Wyatt. "May the promise hold." He didn't open it. Not yet. Behind him, June sat down on an old bench near the wall of gifts, folding her hands in her lap like she was bracing for something. She watched him with calm eyes, but her shoulders were tight, coiled with tension. "You should know the whole truth," she said. "Not just the pieces Harold gave you." Wyatt sat across from her, the gift still resting in his lap like a stone. "I wasn't always here," she began, voice quiet. "And I wasn't always this. Big. Not in body. Not in presence. I used to live in a mining town up north. Worked in the mess hall. Nothing special, just serving beans to men who never looked me in the eye unless they were drunk or cruel." Wyatt's brow furrowed, but he stayed silent. "One winter, a preacher passed through. Said I had an old soul. Said I was meant for more than pouring coffee and cleaning blood off dinner tables. He talked of land, a sacred place, older than the church, where promises could root themselves deep and grow. He gave me a deed. No money, no ceremony. Just a slip of paper and a smile. Said it would take care of me, if I respected it." She leaned back, exhaling through her nose. "I didn't believe him, but I went anyway. I had nothing to lose. The land was raw, the house falling apart, and I almost turned around after the first week. But the ground was soft where it should have been dry. The well never ran out, and I never got sick again. Not once, not even a sniffle. Something was watching over it, or maybe watching through it." Wyatt swallowed. "What about Harold?" June nodded. "He showed up years later, half dead and full of stories. He said the land chose people. Said he'd seen things on the edge of town that made him believe in curses, in bargains. He was sick, lungs full of rot. I took care of him. He said he owed me for that. Said he'd keep the land alive by bringing someone who could match it. Someone it might accept. And that someone was me." She met his eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe you're just the next name on the list." Wyatt stared down at the gift again. He ran a finger along the edge of the black ribbon. "Why the weddings? Why the dresses? Why all this?" June looked at him with a grief so deep it seemed older than her face. "Because the land doesn't just want labor. It wants love, or at least the shape of it. That's the bargain. A union. Not just to me. To this. To the house. The earth. The rhythm of it all." He didn't speak. Couldn't. June leaned forward. "You're not a prisoner, Wyatt. You're a seed. You can plant yourself here, or you can rot trying to leave. But either way," she looked down at the unopened gift in his lap. "The promise has already begun." Wyatt didn't sleep that night. He stayed up, turning the black-wrapped gift over in his hands until the paper softened from the heat of his fingers. He didn't open it. Some part of him feared it would vanish once unwrapped, or worse, confirm everything June had said. By morning, he had made a decision. If he was trapped here, he would test the edges of the cage. He found her already outside, sleeves rolled up, hands in the dirt, repairing a cracked pipe running from the well. She worked like someone who'd never had the option not to. Her strength wasn't for show, it was for survival. "I'll stay one more day," Wyatt said, standing in the doorway, "to help fix the line. Then I leave." June didn't look up. "They all said that. I'm not them," she shrugged. "We'll see." The morning passed in labor. Wyatt rolled up his sleeves, dug until his knuckles split, patched the leak with wire and a rubber seal from the shed. The land responded almost immediately. The well water surged with more pressure than he expected, nearly knocking the hose from his grip. June caught it without flinching. They didn't talk much, but each glance, each moment of passing tools or wiping sweat from their faces, carried a weight. Not romance, not yet. Something older, like two oxen learning how to pull the same cart. By afternoon, Wyatt felt a strange ache behind his ribs. Not exhaustion, something harder to name. A sense of place settling into his bones. He wandered past the barn and into the fields. The soil there was dark and soft, turned over in neat rows, but no crops had been planted. He crouched, pressing his fingers into the dirt. It was rich. Too rich for a patch that hadn't been worked in seasons. This land wanted to grow things. It wanted someone to believe in it. Harold used to say this soil would remember your name if you bled into it, June said behind him, her shadow stretching long in the late light. He wasn't wrong. Wyatt stood slowly. "You could have sold it." June's face tightened. "To who?" "Some town man looking to strip it dry for lumber or cattle feed. This land doesn't want strangers. It wants roots." He looked down at his own hands, blistered, raw, covered in earth and rust. "You think it chose me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, took his hand, and guided him back toward the house. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Wyatt found himself staring once more at the black-wrapped gift on the table. June stood nearby, freshly bathed, dressed in a new linen shift, not bridal, not symbolic, just simple. "Present. You still want to leave?" she asked. "I don't know," Wyatt admitted. "That's better than yes." He picked up the box. His fingers dug beneath the ribbon. It slid free with a whisper. Inside wasn't jewelry or paper or anything romantic. It was a small plow blade, engraved with one word in his uncle's handwriting. "Begin." Wyatt slept harder than he had in months, the kind of sleep that comes after labor, after decision, after letting go of the illusion that escape is still an option. But when his eyes opened, something was off. The light filtering through the curtains was still dim, that same heavy gray twilight he'd seen the day before. He rubbed his eyes, checked the clock on the wall. 4:17 a.m. He blinked. Tried again. 4:17 a.m. Still. He sat up slowly. The house was silent. No morning birds, no creaking boards, no sounds from June in the kitchen. The air was thick, not with heat, but with stillness. He stepped to the window and looked out over the ranch fields, unmoving, sky colorless, like the world had been dipped in ash. He stepped into the hallway, each footstep loud against the quiet. At June's door, he knocked. No answer. He opened it. The room was empty, but laid out on the bed was another wedding dress. New, clean, white as bone. His chest tightened. He turned back down the hall and headed outside. The barn doors were open now, though he'd closed them the night before. Inside, the horses were gone if they'd ever been there at all. Tools lay scattered like they'd been dropped mid-task. The plow blade he'd received sat embedded in a beam above the stable gate, nailed there with a single spike. Wyatt pulled it free. As he stepped out, the air shifted. Not warmer, not colder, just different. He looked toward the edge of the property and stopped. There, at the far end of the path, stood June. But she was changed. She was taller than before, broader. Her hair billowed unnaturally around her shoulders, moving though there was no wind. She wore the dress he had seen on the bed, but it wasn't fabric anymore. It shimmered like it was made of mist and thread and memory. She didn't speak, didn't wave, just waited. Wyatt approached, each step feeling like it took more effort than the last. The ground seemed to hold him now, not trap him, but anchor him. The soil remembered his weight. When he reached her, she looked down at him with something between sorrow and longing. "It's begun," she said softly. "I thought I had a choice." "You did. You still do." But the land's made its offer. He looked down. The field behind her was full now, rows of unfamiliar crops already half-grown, though no one had planted a seed. Life was happening here, with or without him. He stared back at her. "What happens if I stay?" June's voice was quiet but sure. "Then morning never comes, because time doesn't pass here the way it does elsewhere. It grows inward, like roots." Wyatt stood silent. The plow blade felt heavier in his hand. "And if I leave?" Her eyes didn't blink. "You won't make it past the boundary. The house won't let you twice." A slow breath passed between them. No wind, no Sunday, only the sound of life holding its breath. And the moment before something eternal takes hold. Wyatt didn't answer her. He simply stood there, the plow blade hanging by his side, heart thudding like a drum in a parade no one else could hear. The land stretched behind them, endless, breathing, pulsing with quiet expectation. He could feel it now, humming through the soles of his feet. This place wasn't cursed. It wasn't haunted. It was alive. And it was waiting for his answer. June took a step forward, her bare feet soundless on the dirt. The mist dress shifted with her, trailing tendrils that faded into the air. "You don't have to love me," she said. "That's not what this asks. But you do have to belong. To us, to the house, to the land." Wyatt looked down at the blade again. "Begin." The word shimmered now, etched not in metal, but in memory. He could see Harold's face, could hear the man's raspy voice saying, "You're not like me, boy. You stay when things get hard. That's what this land needs." He stepped closer to June, close enough to see the freckle on her collarbone, the faint scar near her jaw. Not a goddess, not a ghost, just a woman who had stayed behind while time moved past her, who had honored a pact no one else believed in. "You said the land wants a marriage," he said. "But that doesn't mean we stop being ourselves." June nodded. "It means we become more than ourselves." He reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation. Her palm was rough, her grip steady. "I'm not promising love," Wyatt said. "Not now. Maybe not ever. I'm not asking for it," she replied. "I'm asking for truth, for work, for staying." He exhaled hard, then knelt. He pressed the plow blade into the earth between them and dragged the first furrow down the field. The soil parted without resistance, dark and rich and ready. Each step felt heavier than the last, but not in a punishing way, more like responsibility settling into his bones. June knelt beside him. They worked together until the field was scored with lines like a page waiting to be written on. Later, in the house, the lamps flickered to life on their own. The clock on the wall spun once, then stopped. The minute hand pointed to now. They stood in the kitchen, not husband and wife, not strangers, not anything that could be written down in legal terms. Just two people held in place by something bigger than them. That night, Wyatt opened the last bedroom door, the one Harold had never used. Inside was a simple bed, clean linens, and a single note on the pillow. "If you're reading this, you stayed. Good. Take care of her. She'll take care of you. H." Wyatt sat down and stared at the window. The sky was still gray. It might be gray forever. But in this moment, he didn't feel trapped. He felt chosen, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to be anywhere else. The land exhaled around them, and the story, whatever it was, began.